My family has always prided itself on being rational, grounded, skeptical to a fault. Ghosts, spirits, paranormal nonsense? We brushed it all off. Which is why I still can't explain what happened that day. I remember heading downstairs. The air felt still, unnaturally quiet. My brother was already in the kitchen, rifling through the pantry. I grabbed a bottle of water, twisted the cap, and after a moment, casually asked, "Do you believe in ghosts?" He shook his head, almost scoffing at the question. But then his expression shifted, just a flicker. He leaned against the counter and said, "Well, there was this one time. Not saying it was anything paranormal, but it was weird." Before he could go further, I cut in. "Did you ever try to scare me when I got home from school?" I'd been meaning to ask him that for a long time. It was the lead into something I'd kept buried, something that never made sense. I didn't expect much from the question, just a laugh or a sarcastic jab. But when he answered, something in me braced for what came next. He said, tilting his head like he was trying to remember. "Well, all I ever did was shoot a Nerf bullet at you once while you were on the computer." That was it. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hoped he'd say something, anything, that would explain what I experienced, something innocent, but that wasn't it. Because what happened to me in 7th grade, it went way beyond a stupid foam dart. I remembered the Nerf thing, sure, but that wasn't what haunted me. That moment was insignificant compared to what I was about to confess. So I took a breath and told him. It happened when I just started 7th grade, beginning of the school year. I could still picture it like it was yesterday. I came home from school, dropped my bag, and headed straight to my bedroom. Nothing unusual. I flopped onto the bed, pulled the covers around me, and popped in my earbuds. Just wanted to unwind, watch a few YouTube videos and zone out for a while. Back then, that was my daily ritual. I never thought that day would be any different. But it was. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. Her voice was casual, routine. She let me know my brother would either be gone already or heading out soon to a friend's place. My parents, as usual, were working late. Which meant, before long, I'd be home alone. Now, I was a quiet kid, especially when no one else was around. Not because I liked the silence, but because deep down, I was afraid. I had this irrational but persistent fear that if I made too much noise, something or someone might hear me, might find me. It was stupid, I told myself. But even back then, I acted like silence was some kind of shield. If I stayed still, if I didn't draw attention, maybe nothing would notice me. Looking back, maybe that fear wasn't so irrational after all. At some point, I paused my YouTube video and got up to use the bathroom. Nothing seemed out of place, but that familiar unease crept in the moment I left my room. An instinct, like something subtle shifting in the air. Now, I should explain. My house has a strange layout, kind of awkward, but I'll do my best to paint the picture, especially the parts that matter for what comes next. If you're standing inside the bathroom, facing the door, and you step out, you've got two options. Turn left, and at the end of a short hallway, you'll run into my brother's bedroom. That's a dead end. But if you go right, you'll reach a staircase that leads downward. The staircase doesn't go straight down. It breaks midway, forming a platform like a little landing. From there, you make a turn and continue down in the same direction you came from to reach the lower level. That staircase leads directly to the main entrance of the house. It's also where we had our home alarm system installed. And here's the thing about that system, it talks. If a door or window is opened, even slightly, a voice box chimes in immediately. It clearly announces which door or window it was. No delay, no ambiguity. Back door open. Living room window open. You always know exactly what just moved. It was our one small comfort. Something about that mechanical voice made us feel secure, like no one could come in or out without us knowing. But that day, that voice would become something else entirely. I was still in the bathroom, just about to flush the toilet when I heard it, a loud, sharp thud from my brother's room. My first instinct, he must be getting ready to leave for his friend's place. Probably just dropped something. No big deal. I flushed, trying to shake off the jolt of tension in my chest, then stepped over to the sink to wash my hands. But as the water rushed over my fingers, something gnawed at me. There were no follow-up sounds, no footsteps, no doors creaking, just silence. Too much silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful, but watchful. I turned off the faucet and stood there for a moment, water still dripping from my hands. I suddenly had this overpowering sense that I wasn't alone, like something was listening, waiting. That's when I stepped toward the door and quietly turned the lock. The click echoed in the stillness like a warning shot. My stomach twisted into a knot. A cold, heavy ache settled in, the kind of fear that doesn't explode. It builds, slow and suffocating. I told myself I was just being paranoid. It's an old house. Houses make noises. But no matter how many times I tried to rationalize it, that unease in my gut wouldn't leave me alone. So I waited, stood completely still in that little bathroom and listened, desperately for another sound, anything. I reached for my pocket, instinctively wanting to grab my phone, but it wasn't there. I'd left it in my room. Great. There was a house phone mounted to the wall next to the mirror, but I didn't dare use it. The dial tones were loud, obnoxiously loud, and the last thing I wanted was to make a noise that could give away my location. Then I heard it. Voices. Not just sounds, talking, low, murmuring. The sound was definitely coming from my brother's room, just down the hall. But the voice I heard, it wasn't my brother. And it definitely wasn't my dad. The tone was strange, deep, uneven, and almost slurred. Like whoever or whatever it was didn't quite know how to speak clearly. The consonants were distorted, too crisp in some places, too soft in others. I caught distinct traces of an S or a sharp T here and there, like the way a tongue clicks against teeth. But I couldn't make out any real words, just fragments of sounds, muttered in a voice that made my skin crawl. It was like someone trying to mimic human speech, but not quite getting it right. I stood there, frozen, heart thudding in my chest, listening to that warped, whispering voice snake its way down the hallway. And I knew, deep in my bones, whoever was in that room wasn't supposed to be. Then it started. A slow, deliberate pounding, like someone dragging their feet, but forcing each step to land hard against the floor. The sound crept from my brother's room and began making its way straight toward me. Each heavy thud echoed louder than the last, closing the distance one agonizing step at a time. My breath caught in my throat as the footsteps stopped, right outside the bathroom door. My body reacted before I could think. I flung myself back, scrambling away from the door and toward the far corner of the room, near the small window. My only thought was escape. If that door burst open, if something came in, maybe I could make it to the window. Maybe I could get out. Fighting wasn't even an option. I was just a 7th grader, skinny, defenseless, and shaking like a leaf. Whoever or whatever was on the other side of that door would overpower me in seconds. I crouched down, heart slamming in my chest, and covered my mouth with both hands, trying not to breathe too loudly. If it didn't know I was in here, maybe I still had a chance. Then the footsteps started again, but this time they moved away. I could hear them now, retreating from the door, making their way toward the stairway. Then silence. And then, crash! A violent, jarring sound, like something heavy had slammed into the wall or floor, right at the middle platform of the stairs. And then another crash at the bottom of the staircase. The low muttering that had haunted the hallway vanished. In its place was that same pounding, louder now, echoing across the lower level until I heard the front door. A loud creak, a pause, then slam. And right after, beep, the alarm system chimed in, that familiar robotic voice calling out, "Front door open." Then, front door closed. My ears rang in the stillness that followed. No more voices, no more footsteps, just silence. Again. Was it over? I didn't know. I didn't move, not yet. I just stood there, trembling, my hand slowly reaching out for the doorknob. I rested my fingers on the cold metal, still covering my mouth with the other hand, afraid to even breathe too deeply. Just to the left of me, low against the wall, was the laundry chute. It led down to our laundry room, right next to where the front door was. And in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder, had it really left? Or was it still down there, waiting? If someone wanted to get from the main floor to the laundry room, it would take at least 30 seconds, maybe more. You'd have to go down the stairs, through the hall, past the entrance, then turn into the laundry room. But only 10 seconds, 10 seconds after I heard the front door open and slam shut, I heard it. Thud, thud, thud. A vicious jabbing noise erupted from the small metal door of the laundry chute. It sounded like someone had taken the end of a broomstick or something long and blunt and was stabbing up into it from below with wild, furious force. I stood there in stunned silence, rooted in place as the pounding continued. My eyes locked onto the little chute door, watching it tremble and rattle violently with each impact. It was shaking, really shaking, like it might give in at any second. My heart was lodged in my throat. I kept praying under my breath, begging that tiny metal door not to pop open. And then, just like that, it stopped. No fade out, no retreating footsteps, just silence. Again. I stayed in the bathroom for what felt like hours. Time warped around me, stretching endlessly in that claustrophobic space. I didn't know how long I waited. I just knew I wasn't going anywhere until I was sure whatever that thing was gone. Eventually, I crept out, inch by inch, careful not to make a sound. I slint quietly back to my bedroom, shut the door behind me, and grabbed my phone. I called both of my parents. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. So I waited. And while I waited, I sat on the edge of my bed, one hand wrapped tightly around the doorknob, holding it in place because my door didn't have a lock. If someone tried to come in, I was the only thing stopping them. When my parents finally got home, I told them everything. They didn't believe me. They brushed it off, tried to convince me it was stress, imagination, maybe a bad dream while I was half asleep. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I felt. Later, my brother came home. I told him too. At first, he doubted me, until I described everything, down to the pounding on the laundry chute. That's when his expression changed. His mouth fell open slightly. Then he told me something I'll never forget. He said he used to hear strange noises coming from the attic, the one that opens right inside his bedroom. Said it would creak open on its own sometimes, even though it was supposed to stay latched shut. We sat in silence for a while, both of us shaken in different ways. Neither of us had an answer. To this day, we still don't. I've never forgotten that afternoon, the way the air felt thick with something unseen, the sounds, the voice, the pounding, the feeling that something was in that house with me. Me and my brother, we've gone over it again and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to piece it together. But we can't. And truthfully, I try not to think too hard about it anymore. because deep down, I still don't know what happened that day. And maybe I never will. But part of me still wants to. My name's Alyssa. I was 16 at the time, living with my mom in a rundown apartment in the Bronx, New York. Living in the Bronx, that was an experience. And not the good kind. The streets were always crawling with sketchy characters, the kind you didn't want to make eye contact with. Walking alone at night felt like playing a game of chance. Every step heavy with caution, every shadow suspicious. Our apartment was small, cramped, the kind of place where every wall felt like it was closing in on you. And our neighbors? Creepy doesn't even begin to cover it. Seriously, not an exaggeration. We lived on the 7th floor. Our apartment was the second to last one at the end of a long, dim hallway. The lighting in that hall always flickered, buzzing fluorescent tubes that gave everything a washed-out gray-blue hue. And right at the very end of that hallway, last apartment on the left, lived him. Our neighbor. He never told us his name. Not once. But somehow, he always seemed to be there, waiting, sitting just outside his door on the old windowsill, day or night. He never smiled, never spoke at first, just stared. He was a black man, maybe in his 60s. Most of his hair was gone, but what was left had turned a dull, ashen gray. His face always carried the same flat, unreadable expression, as if he were watching but not seeing. And every time I walked past, whether I was alone or with my mom, he'd turn his head slowly and look right at me. No words, just that stare. My mom warned me early on. "Stay away from that man," she said. "Don't talk to him. Don't go near him." So I didn't. We never exchanged a single word. At first. Then, one day, it changed. He spoke. It was subtle at first, a quiet hi as I passed by. But what made my skin crawl, what made me stop in my tracks, was that he said my name. "Hi, Alyssa." Just like that. Calm, casual, like we were old friends. Only we weren't. We had never spoken before. I never introduced myself, and my mom certainly didn't. So how the hell did he know my name? I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I just kept walking. But from that day on, every time I saw him, he greeted me the same way. "Hi, Alyssa." Always with that flat, empty look on his face. And every time, it got just a little harder to brush off the chill that ran down my spine. There was one night, one I'll never forget, when my mom had the night shift. That meant I'd be home alone, all night. It was already dark when I got back, around 9 p.m. And of course, he was there, sitting on that same windowsill at the end of the hallway, like always, like he had nowhere else to be, like he never had anything else to do with his life. I kept my head down as I approached our door, trying to pretend he wasn't there. But just as I reached out to unlock it, I heard his voice. Different this time. He didn't say hi. Instead, he asked, flat and calm, "Your mom working tonight?" I froze for a second. Looking back, I cringe at how stupid I was, how naive. Because without thinking, without hesitation, I nodded. Yes. He didn't say another word, just nodded, slowly, deliberately. I felt this uncomfortable jolt run through my chest. Something about the way he nodded didn't feel like acknowledgement. It felt like confirmation. I didn't say anything else. I just turned the key, pushed open the door, and closed it behind me, hard. I'd had enough of his creepy presence for one night. After I got inside, I tried to go about things like normal. Washed up a bit, grabbed a snack, threw some clothes in the laundry, and eventually hopped in the shower. That's when I heard it. A low, strange grumbling sound. Not from the pipes, not something mechanical. It was different, guttural, uneven, like it didn't belong. It sent a ripple of unease crawling down my spine. I stopped, listened. It was definitely coming from somewhere in the apartment. My heart started racing. It wasn't a sound you could easily explain. Not footsteps, not creaks, not a TV left on. It sounded alive. And it wasn't coming from the bathroom. I hurried through the rest of the shower, every second suddenly feeling too long. My mind was racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. As I stepped out, towel barely around me, I heard it again. That same rumbling noise, closer now, fainter but more focused. Outside the bathroom, toward my bedroom. I grabbed the clothes I had set aside earlier and threw them on as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking. Then, cautiously, I opened the door. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I moved toward my room, slow and alert, every hair on my body standing on end. And then I started searching. Top to bottom, I checked everything. Under the bed, behind the door, in the closet. I even pulled open drawers and lifted the curtains. Nothing. No one. But that didn't make me feel any safer. Because something was off. I knew I'd heard that noise, twice. And just because I couldn't find the source, didn't mean it was gone. I searched my entire room, every corner, every shadow. No one was there. But just as I was about to give up, something caught my eye. It was tiny, so small I almost missed it. A pinhole in the wall, just the dot, barely noticeable, tucked away near the corner. Curious and nervous, I stepped closer. I leaned in, squinting at it, then reached out and ran my fingertip over the surface. It was a hole, clean, deliberate. Not something caused by wear and tear. My heart started beating faster. I got down on my knees, slowly, and pressed my eye to it. What I saw on the other side made me jolt backwards so hard I nearly hit the dresser behind me. Because staring right back at me was an eye. A human eye. Bloodshot, wide open, unblinking. Someone was watching me from the other side of the wall. I scrambled to my feet, my breath hitching in my throat. My entire body felt ice cold. And then it hit me. That wall, the one with the hole, was the one that separated our apartment from the neighbors. Him. The man who always sat on the windowsill. The man who somehow knew my name. My mind raced back to the shower. That strange, low grumbling sound. I felt sick. I ran back into the bathroom, my hands shaking as I frantically searched the tiled wall around the shower stall. I didn't know what I was looking for, not exactly, but I had to look. And then I found it. Another hole. Identical in size, perfectly drilled, positioned just high enough to peek into the shower. My skin crawled. My stomach turned. He'd been watching me from both rooms. Who knows how many more holes he drilled? I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called my mom. My voice cracked as I told her everything, what I saw, what I found. I could hear the panic rising in her voice, matching my own. And then, bang, bang, bang! Loud, angry knocks pounded against our front door. Then came the yelling. It was him. Open the door, right now! His voice was sharp, furious. He kept shouting the same thing over and over. I didn't drill those holes! I backed away from the door, my heart thudding in my ears. I could barely hear my mom on the phone anymore. She was freaking out, telling me to call the cops immediately. She was trying to get home as fast as she could. I hung up and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. If there's one good thing about living in the Bronx, it's the police response time. In under 5 minutes, 2 officers were at our apartment door, separating me from the neighbor who was still shouting. I stayed back, still shaken, barely able to breathe as they dealt with him. My mom got home about half an hour later, eyes wide with worry, hugging me like she'd never let go. She didn't waste time. She pressed charges: stalking, invasion of privacy, criminal mischief. The apartment management didn't hesitate either. The man was evicted. And they patched up the holes, every single one, on his dime. I'll never forget the time my friend Hal and I went camping. Hal's the outdoorsy type, an Eagle Scout, a total nature lover. He lives for that stuff. Always out on some wilderness trip, always talking about trails and survival techniques and disconnecting from the modern world. That kind of guy. One time he invited me to come along. I figured, why not? See what it was all about. His girlfriend at the time, Maya, was coming too. She was quiet, kind of artsy, but sweet. I wasn't part of their usual hiking crew or anything. I got a last-minute invite, which probably should have been a red flag, but I didn't think much of it. We all carpooled together. The drive took about 3 hours, most of it spent watching the scenery blur past while Hal rattled on about proper fire building techniques and the importance of real camping. According to him, that meant no campsites, no neighbors, no bathrooms, no signs of civilization whatsoever. Camping at a campsite doesn't count, he said. If there are other people around, you're just sleeping outside. You're not actually in nature. So instead of heading to any marked location, Hal took a hard turn off some half-forgotten road, just a narrow dirt trail cutting through thick forest. No signs, no name. Just woods. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, like he'd been there before. He drove down that trail for a couple of minutes, the car bumping and groaning over rocks and roots, until finally he slowed to a stop. Then he put the car in park. No markers, no clearing, nothing but trees on either side. At first, I didn't even realize we were getting out there. It was so inconspicuous, I thought maybe we were just taking a break. But Hal opened the trunk and started unloading gear like this was the most normal thing in the world. Maya and I exchanged a quick glance. She didn't say anything, just followed his lead. The trunk was filled with the basics: tents, sleeping bags, some food, toilet paper, a first aid kit. Hal had it all organized like he'd done this 100 times before. Probably had. He looked over at us and said, "Usually I pack lighter, but I figured I'd make this trip easy, for you two." I didn't really know what that meant, but something in the way he said it made me feel like he was preparing for more than just a weekend in the woods. Once we found the spot that Hal deemed good enough to set up camp, he immediately started handing out tasks like some kind of wilderness drill sergeant. Setting up a tent was one thing I actually knew how to do, so Hal handed that job to me. 2 tents, he said. You got it? I nodded and he disappeared into the woods without another word. Maya stayed behind with me. She helped a bit with the tents, holding poles, smoothing out the tarp, but mostly busied herself unpacking supplies from the bags. She seemed content to keep her hands moving even if her mind was somewhere else. Hal came and went, vanishing into the darkening forest and returning every few minutes with an armful of dry firewood. He didn't say much while he did it, just worked like a machine, focused and efficient. By the time nightfall crept in, and it came quicker than any of us expected, Hal had collected enough wood to get a strong fire going. The tents were up, camp was set. The fire flickered to life, casting long shadows that danced between the trees. It felt warm, safe even, like a little bubble of light in the middle of nowhere. We sat around it, drinks in hand, laughing and swapping stories, mostly ones from Hal's and my shared past, old memories, stupid stuff we did back in the day. Maya wasn't in most of those stories, and I couldn't help but notice how quiet she got after a while. She laughed politely now and then, but you could tell she wasn't really into it. Eventually, she stood up and said she was turning in for the night. No drama, no complaints, just tired, I guess. She disappeared into her tent, leaving Hal and me by the fire. We kept talking for a while, our voices naturally lowering to a quieter tone out of courtesy. The mood shifted a bit, less rowdy, more relaxed. The kind of calm that creeps in when the fire starts burning lower and the woods grow darker. I cracked open one last beer, drank it slower this time. By then, the alcohol was hitting me. Not heavy, just enough to dull the edges. We chatted, our words slower, more spaced out. Then, Hal suddenly stiffened. "Shh," he whispered, holding up a hand. I stopped mid-sentence and listened. At first, there was nothing but the soft crackle of the fire. Then, I heard it. Footsteps. Faint but unmistakable. Out there in the woods. Just beyond the reach of the firelight. Someone or something was walking out in the distance, and it wasn't any of us. When I turned to Hal, trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, "What if it's a bear?" He gave a small laugh, though it felt more like he was trying to reassure himself than me, and said, "It's probably just a deer." I wasn't convinced, so I pressed, "Are you sure a bear wouldn't come this close, even with the fire and us talking?" He didn't answer this time. That silence did more to unsettle me than anything else. The footsteps out in the dark continued, slow and deliberate. But something wasn't right about them. It wasn't just a passing animal. They circled, looping around the perimeter of our camp, and with each pass, the sound grew slightly louder, closer. Whatever it wasn't going away. Then we heard it. A sound unlike anything I'd heard before. It wasn't a growl, not really. It was this strange, wet clicking noise, paired with something almost like a low gurgle. Organic, but wrong. Like bones shifting or teeth snapping out of sync. I turned to Hal and whispered, "Is that a wolf?" Again, no answer. He just gave me a sharp look and motioned, "Get in the tents." No argument from me. I scrambled into the tent I had pitched for myself, my hands fumbling with the zipper as my pulse pounded in my ears. I glanced over and saw Hal disappear into the other tent, the one meant for him and Maya. The fire outside crackled softly, but it no longer felt warm or comforting. Instead, it cast long, flickering shadows across the thin nylon walls of the tent. Every movement of the flames outside painted unsettling silhouettes across the fabric, making everything feel distorted, stretched. The clicking sound grew louder, sharper, like whatever was out there was closer now, circling slower, on purpose. And then it became clear. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a bear, and it definitely wasn't a deer. It didn't even sound like anything from this earth. The sound was alien, wrong on a level that made my skin crawl. Like something mimicking the way a creature should sound, but doing it all wrong. My breath came short and fast. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. That's when I saw it. The shadow. It passed right across the tent wall, long, thin, twitching at the joints in unnatural ways. It wasn't just passing by. It was hovering, right outside my tent. And all I could do was sit there, frozen, watching that grotesque silhouette shudder and shift under the flicker of the firelight, while trying desperately not to scream. Something massive moved past my tent. I couldn't see it directly, only the shadow it cast. But the shape? It was horrific. Tall, bipedal. Its gait was slow and uneven, but each footfall was heavy. The ground seemed to shudder beneath its steps. I could feel every impact deep in my chest. It walked right past my tent, dragging some part of itself as it moved, the sound coarse and unnatural. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't stop. But it wasn't done. It moved toward Hal and Maya's tent. The air was thick with silence for a moment, until it shattered. Maya screamed. It wasn't a startled cry or a shout for help. It was raw terror, the kind of scream a person lets out when they think they're about to die. Then I heard Hal. His voice cracked and panicked, shouting over and over, "Run!" I couldn't see what was happening. I didn't want to, but I didn't need to. The sounds alone painted a nightmare in my head. Their tent unzipped with frantic hands. I could hear the two of them scrambling outside, crashing through the underbrush. Without thinking, I burst out of my own tent and chased after them. It was pitch black. No flashlights, no phones, just black trees, black sky, and the sound of our footsteps pounding the earth. And behind us, more footsteps. Not ours. Something was chasing us. I was in the back, always in the back, and I could hear it, impossibly close. Whatever it wasn't running, but it was fast in its own unnatural way. Its strides were longer, heavier, wrong. Branches whipped at my face as we tore through the forest, ducking and stumbling blindly. Then, somehow, Hal found the car. How? I'll never know, but we spilled out into the small clearing where it was parked. No one looked back, no one dared. We just ran. I flung open the back door and dove in. Maya was already in the passenger seat, shaking, barely able to breathe. Hal jumped behind the wheel, slammed the door shut, and floored it. The tires tore through gravel and dirt as we bolted down the trail, headlights bouncing wildly off trees in darkness. The road was barely a road at all, just a narrow path choked with shadows and overgrowth. We made it maybe 30 seconds down the trail when, dead end. The path just ended. No warning, no room to turn easily. Hal swore under his breath, yanked the wheel, and tried to maneuver the pickup in a tight turn. But we weren't far from where we'd just been. Not far from whatever had chased us. And it might not be far behind. I leaned forward from the back seat, panic rising in my throat. "Turn off the headlights," I whispered, my voice sharp. "If it's still out there, it can see us." But Hal shook his head, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I need them," he snapped. "If I can't see, we're going to slam into a tree trying to turn around." He wasn't wrong. The trail was narrow, uneven, barely wide enough for the truck to move. Trees loomed like giants just inches from the bumper, so Hal kept the lights on and kept shifting. Drive, reverse, drive, reverse. The engine lurched forward, then back, tires skidding against loose gravel as he worked to make a tight turn. Every movement felt like it took an eternity. Meanwhile, I sat frozen in the back seat, biting my nails, clenching my teeth. My eyes darted from shadow to shadow just beyond the reach of the headlights, every flicker of movement setting off alarm bells in my head. I expected to see it again, whatever that thing was at the campsite. I didn't even want to blink. At long last, Hal got the truck angled just right. With one final shift, he hit the gas and we tore out of there, tires spitting dirt and debris behind us. We didn't look back. We didn't dare. We left everything behind. All our gear, tents, sleeping bags, food, gone. Over $100 worth of equipment abandoned in the woods. But none of us cared, not even a little. There was zero chance we'd ever go back for it. On the drive back, we barely spoke. The only sounds were Maya's uneven breathing and the hum of the tires beneath us. Later, when we asked Maya what happened, what made her scream, her answer chilled me to the bone. She said she woke up to the sound of heavy breathing, so close it felt like it was inside the tent. Then the whole side of the fabric began to press inward. Something was pushing against it, clawing at the seams, trying to tear it open. Hal said he'd never seen anything like it, never heard anything like those noises, and he's not the kind of guy to scare easy. He still can't explain what it was. But there's one thing we're all sure of. It wasn't human. You might ask, how do you know that? Easy, because of its size and the sounds it made. Whatever it was, it walked on two legs, but it wasn't a person. I think everyone at some point in their life has one truly unexplainable, horrifying experience, the kind that sticks with you, that keeps you up at night, that reminds you that not everything in this world makes sense. For us, that camping trip was ours, and we'll never forget it.